Da and Sign and everything in between once more. Um, so in Thomas, the motion we're talking about here would be modus. Modus, the Latin word. Um, what we're talking about is change in a broad sense, not just in any sense. Or, like I said, in this strict sense, we're talking about change with respect to the things that are possible or which comprise potentials or powers. Um, so, I mean, that it's possible somebody can stand up and sit down, for instance, and then also possibilities in the mathematical realm in other regions. Um, it's possible that somebody could learn a language, so for instance, and this happens through modus. It's a kind of movement, it's a kind of change, it's a learning. Um, Modus, movement in this kind of sense, ultimately wants to lead us to describe the sense where there's a perfect sort of motion, which is the infinite perfection of God being realized. But on the other side, when we um, have no motion, the worst case, like, I guess that would be sort of analogous to a so-called piercing cold of complete entropy, something like that. Just things are moving just a tiny bit, but they don't really have any potential. They're not really doing anything that's worth calling anything. Um, whereas, so just as in the saying in the beginning of the Aristotelian saying in the beginning of Anna Karenina about all the happy families are happy in the same way, but the unhappy families are each unhappy in their own way. God is like this one channel where the least possible entropy, and then you have the other side. So in the same way, good and evil, evil is only the deprivation of the good, and in this case, it's the complete rest state. There's a complete limit state of the total absence of motion, where motion has all these different senses, but finally it has this perfect sense, which would be the cosmos completed, but not just completed, but perfected. I think there's a move between, one can make a distinction between the completion, which Plato, Aristotle um, sought, and um, the infinite perfection, which is thought in this atomistic synthesis in the Catholic thinking. Um, so the infinite perfection implies that time is happening in a certain way. So they get the infinite point of God, the eternity and time coincide, right? So the moving image coincides with the God, and then we're sort of in this region of the Zeno paradoxes and all kinds of things. But I think the way to state it is, for Heidegger, one way to approach it is that the arche, this word arche, which I think originated maybe with the Anaximander, but with one of the first thinkers, and it goes along with Anaximander's apeiron. Um, that there be something that's like a potential, like as in Heidegger speaking of Dasein as being the manner in which, or the way in which the world is here for us, um, rather than its content, the how, um, rather than the what. And what we deduced from Agamben before about the aeon is a sense that within aeon, within this definition of time, of the so-called vital force, is like life and some kind of impetus of life, something that moves it forward. Um, there seems to be thought these kind of time as aeon, And then within that is discovered the mechanical conception of clock time, of comparing a physical system to another physical system. And that rests already in the movement of Dasein, which becomes more basic with the modus or with this change as it was already defined, but perhaps rests even more basically in the I, or in the which is eternity, or in this aeon, which has been strangely and variously interpreted as soon as one began to move from archaic conceptions which seemed wrong when consciousness began to have discussions and think over things, but which moved the very, as it were, Nietzschean way, aleatory, random. Suddenly, we're talking about the spinal fluids, and then we're talking about eternity, and we're using the same word, and we're switching around its meanings. But how can one go back to the meaning that was accrued, say, over 50,000 years when language was coming into existence? Because that this vital force concept, um, it's as though there's always the impression that we have language that came out of nowhere, out of our direct observation, and maybe in some way we do have direct observation, but it's always in interaction with the rest of the deposit of language, which is pulled up, as it were, in the lockbox of a body of water meant for us to civilize ourselves on by drinking.